You're listening to Krush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Krush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at crushperformance.com. Now, here he is, the Crusher.
And welcome to Krush Performance, everybody. I am Jeff Krushell, and we're your weekly source for performance information. If you're an athlete, player, or coach, if you have questions, comments, smart remarks, reach out to us. JeffKrushell.com is the website. You can search me out on all social media platforms. Search out Krush Performance or Krush Jeff and direct message me. Again, if you do have a question, if you need some help, if we don't have the answers, here's one thing everybody knows. Everybody who listens to the show knows we'll find it. We know somebody out there who will answer the question for us, so please do reach out. And also, in our 20th season here, you guys all know we're going back to visit with some of the great guests we've had on over the last 20 years. If there is a guest or a conversation that hit home to you, or for you, let us know. I'd like to hear about it. And if there's somebody you'd like to see on the show again, let's do it. Let's catch up. And that's what we've been doing. Man, there has been some great shows at the tail end of 2025. We revisited with some of the great guests on the show, and we're going to continue that moving forward. And today is no exception. A Krush Hall of Famer, neuropsychologist, Dr. Martin Mrazik, who's a huge part of the show in the Krush brain game, for example. He was instrumental in helping us frame up what this brain game is all about. Because remember, in our programs, when we look at athlete development, long-term athlete development, the phases that athletes go through and what they're ready for based on their maturity, their emotional readiness, and also their skill levels, where they're at in their sport, are really relevant, not just on the physical side. And we've got that down pat. Listen, if you want to get stronger, we can do that. You want to get faster, more powerful, more agile, you need better eye-hand coordination. There's not a lot we can't train. But I'll tell you this, when we started really diving into the Krush brain game and understanding really where we're at in terms of mental performance and bringing those two worlds together, listen, it's been a game changer for every single athlete we work with and for every athlete out there that brings those two together. So that brings us around to today's show. I don't know what to call it yet. We'll think of a cool name, but the postseasons in sport, man, the playoffs. Like, let's go back 2 years ago, 2024, the NHL playoffs. Oh my goodness. Oilers go right to the bitter end with the Florida Panthers, right? Repeat the following year, 2025. The NHL postseason was absolutely epic. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen better hockey. Something's going on right to the bitter end. And not just from the teams that made the NHL finals, but towards the end of the season and the push. Then let's go back to last year's Major League Baseball World Series. Oh my goodness. Let me think for a second. No, I've already thought about it. I'm just joking around. There has never in my lifetime, I don't think, been a better postseason in baseball. And I'll say this comfortably. The only time I think I've ever seen better baseball, and you guys know that's my world, was in the World Baseball Classic. The last World Baseball Classic, Japan, USA in the final. It was intense. It was aggressive. That was real baseball for all the marbles. World Championship, the true World Championship, right? But last year's postseason in Major League Baseball and the last month of the season, when teams realized they had a shot at making the postseason, something happened. And it's been happening over time. And then, of course, I have to take us to this year's NFL postseason. Those wild card games. I mean, into the end of the season, the wild card weekend, every game, I was enamored. And last weekend, I was actually down in Denver last weekend presenting to a big group of coaches. And the Bills were staying at our hotel. And it was kind of cool, you know, because security's all there. But, you know, there were a few guys walking around, and just seeing them locked in just got me thinking about what we're going to talk about on today's show. what is happening in sport? Well, there's a lot of theories going on. We know that physically we're preparing athletes better. We know with all the technology, and you could see it in the NFL. If you watch the NFL, you can see the technology the teams have on every single play, understanding what's happening, who's going where, and what the next play is going to be. It's absolutely incredible. If you were to go behind the scenes in baseball, behind the scenes in Major League Soccer, behind the scenes in the NBA, you would see incredible technology driving decision making, not just for the technical, tactical side of the game, but also on the athlete health, wellness, and performance side. It is a crazy, crazy time. Now, getting back to the Krush Brain Game, here's what we know right now. As of this day in 2026, we know, at least I feel, based on everything we've done on this show, and we've done a big deep dive. If you've watched the show, you know the Krush Brain Game has been a serious deep dive into mental performance, not just for sport, but just for human endeavor, right? We just happen to use sport as our reference point. And we know, like right now, we can now map, monitor, and train the brain like never before. We have technologies we've never had access to before. We have ways of monitoring the brain real time that we've never had access to before. And we have ways to train and understand the training effects and how the brain is responding to certain types of training. And that's never happened before. So listen, we're in a very exciting time because we've got the physical side down. But now we take that mental side and put it together. I think that's kind of what we're seeing. And to help us dive into that and maybe understand it a little better, I had to go to Dr. Marty Mrazik. So let's get set for this conversation. And I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this topic? Have you endeavored into a mental performance side of the game that's helped you achieve or your players achieve? Some of the conversations I had it down in Denver last weekend with the coaches there was tremendous. Some of the things they're doing goes right along with stuff that Marty and I were trying to investigate a number of years ago in terms of not just getting the body physically ready for competition and practice, but also now firing up the brain for practice and competition, right? A lot of cool things going on. Let's get to our conversation with Marty Mrazik. We'll have a lot to discuss after. I'll see you there. All right, Dr. Martin Mrazik, Krush Hall of Famer, joining us here early in our 2026 campaign. And no better time, Dr. Mrazik, because listen, I'm enamored with the postseason here. You know, I'll maybe just set the tone here, and I've talked a bit about it already, but I'm so glad to have you on because I don't know if it's just me, but I think I'm seeing a trend here. Like if we look at the NHL, for example, the last two Stanley Cup runs, the postseason. The season is great, but man, the postseason is just, it's been another level. The Major League Baseball postseason last year, 2025, I think in my lifetime, the best I've ever seen. And you know, talking to some old timers and in baseball Hall of Famers, I think it's pretty agreed upon. That was a very, very special postseason, seeing the Toronto Blue Jays and the Dodgers right to the very last out of that entire postseason. And now we're seeing what I think is an absolutely epic NFL postseason. Here's the one thing I will confess to everybody. I love the NBA, but I only have so much bandwidth, right? So I'm not really into the NBA and following the postseasons, but when I do watch the highlights and stuff, again, that game has gone to another level. Just really special times in sport, Dr. Mrazik. And I think what I'd like to do today is talk to you a bit about why this might be happening. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, no, I think it has. And especially if you're a Canadian, seeing the Blue Jays, Canada's team, get to the World Series, the Oilers being in the big dance the last couple of years, I would agree. There's been a lot of reason to be excited.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I was just down in Denver here this last weekend, just after the show. So we're just catching up here. But of course, the NFL, the Bills and the Broncos playing last week. And the Bills were actually at our hotel, which was kind of cool, just to see them locked in, you know, sort of locked away with the security and everything. But saw a couple of the guys and just a little bit different, I think. And again, I don't know the guys, but it just got me thinking about the importance of the playoffs and sport. Keeping in mind, everybody, this is sport, right? But for everybody involved in sport, this is pretty special stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think to your point there, if we look at the evolution of the role of sports psychology and mental performance in sport, and especially at the elite levels, really post-COVID, there was kind of a bit of an awakening there, and you would be hard pressed now to find professional teams that don't have somebody, sports psychologist, performance person, consulting with them. And I think that we're seeing some of the product of that movement. Where before, conversations about readiness, routines, being mentally dialed in, dealing with distraction, well, those were topics. There wasn't a strategy there. And so I think now we're already seeing teams that have really invested heavily in that. And so players are much more aware and mindful and intentional about the mental side of things and being prepared. And so I think the fact that you saw these guys that were pretty locked in, that's kind of interesting, because I think that's definitely a behavior that we're seeing that I think that's very intentional. The players are recognizing the importance of that. And then when we see the product on the field, a lot of the games that we've seen in the NFL playoffs, there's been a couple blowouts, but a lot of them have been really close and comebacks, right? Well, mentally, you have to be really, really dialed in, and you have to have kind of that process for dealing with, letdowns and mistakes and all that kind of stuff. So, from my vantage point, I'm seeing some things that would really reflect kind of a shift and an augmentation of the sports psychology impact. And I think it's reflected just in an exciting level of play.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. So let me ask you this. Let's just throw this other, not to age you at all or do anything, but if I were to ask you, Marty, how many years are you now in that world, the world of mental performance, sports psychology, the neuroside? And one thing I really appreciate about all the work that you do with your group and all the good people there is the work on concussion, rehabilitation, return to play, just return to life stuff, right? With the brain injury stuff as well. But how long have you been involved in that world, just to give everybody some perspective?
Yeah, so I've been directly involved with the professional sports in the NHL for 23 years now. So again, as you mentioned, started off really kind of focusing on the concussion assessment, management, how do we do a better job? But as we've talked on your show many times, it really evolved into not just avoiding concussions, but about brain health. And what are the things that we do to keep ourselves healthy? And of course, brain health is so related and tied to the mental health. And so that's really evolved. And so I would say I've definitely seen a significant shift, even, when I first started, just the whole awareness of sleep, how to manage sleep, nutrition, strength and conditioning, which is your area. We've seen a real evolution of those things to the point where, like, now to play competitively, you have to have these as part of your picture. And for me, in the sports psychology world, I would definitely say that most players will, and especially younger players, are going, I need this to be better. And so I think that's interesting, right? Is that players are now looking for every advantage, and that the mental side of things, especially as you get to the more competitive side, well, we know that's a big part of growth as a player and getting to that next level.
Oh, no, I love this perspective, Dr. Mrazik. When I started with the Blue Jays, late 90s, to age me a bit as well, right? But listen, strength and conditioning was not a thing. Big league teams had strength coaches, right? But it was return to play stuff, and there were some really good things going on. But I was one of the first minor league strength coaches for all of those hundreds and thousands of players in the minor leagues. It wasn't a thing. As a matter of fact, when I started in, they were actually more keeping athletes away from weight training than they were encouraging, right? So we've seen this massive shift. And for me personally, thinking back 20 years, the mental game, there wasn't enough time or bandwidth for any of that at the time. And number one reason is I don't think we really had a good idea of what it was all about or what it could actually do or how to implement it. Isn't it crazy? If you think about it, it's actually quite a speed bump. It's a blink in time where we've come from, as you said, 20 years ago when you started, to where we're at today, and how ingrained it is right now, the mental side. Because I'm not going to lie to you, my world on the sports science, the physiology side, I think it's very cut and dry, right? We kind of know this thing. We know about building strength, building muscle size. We know about manipulating or stressing the nervous system to get power and speed. That stuff's very cut and dry given effort and time. But this mental game, man, it is fascinating to me. And that's why it's a big part of our show for sure. But it's fascinating to watch, as you mentioned, how it's come together and how important it is now in sport and in life, as you mentioned. Hey, the one thing that I really am aware of, with all the work you guys have done and all the people around the world on the concussion side is the awareness of that brain health and mental health. It's really blossomed together, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the biggest shifts that I've seen is that it used to be that, athletes who may have had mental health concerns or performance issues, it was like, well, go and deal with this yourself, or go see that person over there, right? And so it was kind of siloed, right? And that, for athletes, again, you don't want to be siloed, you don't want to be seen as weak. But we've really shifted, I think, the way we approach this to say, yes, it is about addressing the challenges, the mental wellness challenges, but it's also about that. How do we use our minds and our brains and our psyche in the best way possible? And so we've really shifted it away from just the bad to we actually use this stuff regularly, a practice. And I know we've learned a lot from you guys in the strength and conditioning world because, you were the innovators with routines. You were the innovator of warm-ups. We've talked many times about warming up the body and also warming up the brain and warming up the mind. And so we've definitely seen a shift where, again, you will not walk into any professional team where they're not doing something on the mental side of things on a regular basis. We didn't see that, again, to date myself, when I first started, 20 plus years ago, we never saw that. Now we're seeing that. And so to me, I think that's interesting. There's, still a lot of work to do of how do we use that in the best way possible. You've got a lot of great stuff in coachability and working with young athletes because it's important for them to develop that mindset in a day and age where it's all impulsive, gotta do, be great right away, can't be patient, right. The talk about the mental marathon versus the mental sprint. It takes a while to develop your mindset to be at that professional level. So like I said, it's been very interesting. I would agree with you. You've seen the shift in the physical world, and I've definitely seen the shift in the mental world.
Yeah, and it's a multiplier. It's not mental plus, or it's not the physiology plus the mental side. It's times. There's a times. It is a multiplier when these two things start working together. And I can't help but think, looking at the last two NHL playoffs, looking at Major League Baseball last year, right from the end of the season, and even before, leading into the playoffs, when teams start getting in the hunt, when they know they're on track to get to the postseason, and also then, compete in the postseason, what's happening in the NFL right now. And I can't help but think about the Olympics. We keep seeing world records being broken. I mean, we're seeing it in the pool right now with some of the great Canadian swimmers. We're seeing some very cool things going on in the skiing world right now. Lindsey Vonn back, another World Cup here, I think, last weekend at 41 years of age. All of these incredible things that are happening in sport. You can't help but think, man, we are just on the cusp of really tapping into human potential, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're seeing more and more older players, whether you like Aaron Rodgers or not. He comes back from a devastating injury, and he comes back. And again, whether you think he had a great season or not, but he's playing at the highest level. Lindsey Vonn, we're just seeing a lot of examples of these athletes that have durability in their sport, which is something we really didn't see a whole lot of in the past. And so that's a combination of a lot of factors. But I do think that it's a product, like you said, of being very intentional, using the physical principles that, strength and conditioning, like all those things, stretching, like avoiding injury. You've talked so much about baseball and the impact of, throwing and pitching counts and all that stuff. It has an impact. And I think we're seeing some of that. And when you're less injured, you're more likely to be on the field, right? And so the more we focus on that, and then the psychological piece, I mean, one thing that I really would love to really invest more time in is just the psychological approaches to athletes who are injured, because it's a very difficult challenge for athletes to come back from injuries. They do it, but what is the process, especially when you're a young athlete? So that's a bit of a side, but yeah, I would agree that it's a very exciting time in sport, because we're really seeing the evolution of some things, people getting better, people getting faster, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah, for me personally, on the mental side, again, if I took everyone, and I've mentioned this to you before, I'm fascinated by the psychology side, right? And I always have been. And in university, I took every single psychology course I could take until they said, stop, no, man, you can't take it. They wouldn't let me take anymore unless I entered the faculty, which I didn't have the time to do. But it's fascinating to me. But now, you mentioned it earlier. You mentioned this idea of systems. It's not just a matter of, okay, mental health, we get it. And that's important. Anxiety, dealing with stress, those are life things. That's, we can use sport to help people in life as well. But when it comes to human performance in sport, we now have plans, strategies, and long-term sort of programming and processes that can help athletes peak their mental performance right alongside their mental performance. What an exciting time in human performance right now. I'm enamored with all of this.
Yeah, I am too, and nothing is better than watching athletes peak and the Olympic Games that are coming up and seeing really people that are peaking at the right time. And there's a lot of strategy behind that, but there's also a lot of mental strategy because something that we have talked about a lot about is the burnout, the other side of it, and making sure that athletes, the multi-sport athletes, and how that's generally a good thing. And it really is the pushback against burnout and other, the mindfulness strategies and the, creating mental calm. I think all those things are really important because the body can be stressed, and athletes are constantly stressing themselves. And so we have to guard against, like, what does that mean when an athlete is kind of pushed too hard or we're seeing signs of mental breakdown? So I think it's been very interesting to see that we have more safeguards now in the world of mental performance. We're much more attentive to athletes when we're looking at signs of burnout, when we're looking at signs of stress. I think we're just better at that. And that's where, again, the combination of both strength and conditioning and mental becomes really, really important because, as you know, when working with an athlete that is struggling or dealing with injuries, it's not just one solution, right? They really have to have a holistic plan that's really helpful for them. And that's what's exciting to me, is that I think we're really seeing a product of a lot of this coming together, and the importance of a holistic approach to managing athlete performance and recovery from injury.
Yeah, I like it. And your EAS program, eas.ca, you guys can check that out, eliteathleteservices.ca. It's all about that. And this is an exciting time on another level as well, because, you're working with a bunch of pro guys in the NHL and pro football. Of course, I've got athletes all over the map in many different sports. But if I think about it, Dr. Mrazik, this is my 21st year working around the world with Major League Baseball. And my job for those guys was going to all these little areas in the world and helping them develop systems and programs for athlete development in the game of baseball. That was my job. And the number one hopes is to get kids to the highest level of the sport. In some of these areas, they're not baseball areas. Some of them are great baseball areas. But the exciting thing is, we're now talking to coaches who are working with, kids who are 10, 11, and 12 years old, and they're talking about this stuff now. So we're now, I think, about to see a wave or a tsunami, I hope, of young athletes who are going to be coming into the world, into their high performance pathway, if they find their way there, with an idea of what this mental game's all about. Maybe for the first time in human history, we're going to have athletes that are coming through their entire developmental process with some kind of exposure to the mental game. How freaking exciting might that be? Or am I off there, do you think?
No, I think it is exciting. And I'll just say that, again, over 20 years ago, you would never see a group of guys meditating, engaging in mindfulness. And, with some of the teams that I work with, I would say over half of them, if you say how many of you are engaged in mindfulness practices, they would tell you, yes, I am. So it is, you're right. I think we're seeing a lot of traction and momentum. I think now that we have an understanding of how this applies, we really want to fine tune these approaches. I do find, for me personally, that it is very individual. There's no one size that fits all. And so we talk about process, and that's such a big thing that you and I talk about, is just the importance of process. We're not looking at the outcome, we're looking at the process. And for some athletes, the process is a lot of mindfulness. For other athletes, it really is being very kinesthetic in their approach, and really activating their bodies as a way to increase their level of arousal and focus, those kind of things. So I think we really understand the importance of it. And now we're kind of fine tuning what this looks like for individual athletes. I think it's great that we see young athletes embracing this. It's not a shameful thing anymore to say, yeah, I work with a sports psychologist. It used to be, but it doesn't seem to be anymore. But now I think, kind of the next phase of this is really how do we, like you said, systematically approach these things. I still think a lot about youth development and the importance of having system-wide practices within a group, because there's so many individual variabilities. You have coaches that believe certain things and don't. And I do think that the importance of really having some core principles, safeguards, as I said, in the world of mental performance is really important, because you don't want to overdo things. You don't want to overemphasize things. I know some coaches are worried that this mental approach is making athletes soft, right? That, they can't, push athletes. And so where do we find the limits there? What are the necessary ingredients to push athletes to make them feel a little uncomfortable? Because we know you have to be a little bit uncomfortable in order to grow and in order to challenge yourself. So I think we're wrestling with that. We can't be the old school hard nosed coach that it used to be. Not many of those guys, those coaches left. But where is that fine line? Where is that balance? Because some athletes have come to me and said they struggle with a coach that, is very soft and always encouraging and doesn't give them critical feedback. That's also an issue, because that can affect your mindset. So it is very interesting that we're navigating this really interesting landscape.
Oh, no, it's a very, very exciting time for sure. And I love the word mindset. I love the word mindfulness. So many great things there. But I really like this idea of long-term development. We know it takes a lifetime to really become a world-class top performer, right? I mean, if we look at the age of these athletes breaking into the highest level of sport, and then for those athletes at the younger ages who decide they want to chase down the dream. And here's my message always, and you and I have talked about this. I always say to every athlete, we don't know how good you possibly can become until you go through a process, right? And the fact now that the mental side of it, these mental processes are part of that long-term development plan is so exciting for me to match that with the physical development and the phases of development when they're emotionally or mentally and physically prepared for it, right? The mental systems have to be appropriate for the age, the emotional readiness, the mental awareness, and also the skill level of the athletes as well. And that's a beautiful thing that we can mirror with the physiology side of things.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, it's for me, and what I see in my role with young athletes is you give them tools, and then it's a matter of them refining the tools. And like you said, developmentally, a 14 or 15-year-old their brains are going to be very different than they are at even 18 and 19. And so really there's that constant work to refine the tools, because the younger kids, they don't visualize quite as much. Mindfulness is not something that, is easier for them because of the development of the brain. There are some things, that's why I take more a kinesthetic approach with the younger athletes. So they're doing things as they're engaged in the mindfulness practices. As they get older, it becomes a little bit easier with the, development of the frontal lobe brain and our self-awareness. So yeah, it's really important. And I think sometimes people want a quick fix to the mental game. If they're struggling, they want that, well, what do I do, and what is one strategy that I need to do? What does Connor McDavid do? What does Tom Brady do? Like all that stuff. And it's, as you said, yes, we have strategies that can be very important and helpful, but it is a process. And you want to be committed to that process, just like we've learned so much from the strength and conditioning world that you don't take a 14-year-old and put them on a weight program for a year and then say they're good. No, it's an ongoing evolution of that. And I think we're learning about how that, can be helpful, but we're still there's lots of work to do to say what is the best practices for different developmental stages.
Oh, so fantastic. And again, in our top 5 priorities, that Krush brain game is our 5th priority in the list, but it's also a very special one because it's our rover. It's our utility man. If people need, or if an athlete has an issue that's holding them back from performance, hey, that brain game, it's quickly above sleep, rest, and recovery. If they have anxiety or stress that's disrupting their sleep and rest, which is our number one priority for human performance, then that brain game, all of a sudden, it is the top priority. And that's a revelation, I think, for a lot of people. Exciting stuff. Well, hey, before we let you go, because I know you have to get going here, I've got to get to this, though. Look, I am just blown away by this postseason performances in all these different sports. Let's just talk about this for our listeners. And you've been around it. I've been around it for sure. But I've speaking in Denver here this last weekend, a bunch of high school and college coaches. It was fantastic, the stuff we're seeing here. But a lot of questions about, hey, do we change our mindset? Do we change our mental approach? Do we change the physical conditioning into the postseason? Like, do things change, right? Or do we stay the course and do what we do best, right? So there's this conversation coming around, which is also really exciting because that conversation hasn't really been part of our interactions with coaches in the past. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point, and we know that there are a select few athletes that actually thrive in chaos, right? There are some, and for them, they're kind of looking for that. But I would say the majority of athletes that I work with anyway, you don't want to change things too much. Again, like you say, continuing to reinforce, I would say doing more of your superpowers, do more of the things that are helpful for you. So your routines, extend those, mindfulness practices, extend those, conversations within your team, keeping each other accountable, right? Just really being intentional about avoiding distractions. That's just becomes even more imperative when you're in the postseason because there's just more stress. There's more of that. And I think it was very interesting that we saw some examples in the hockey world last year in the playoffs where players were like being very intentional about staying, with families, staying with other people, just as a way to balance that. And I think that, we can't emphasize the importance of for you, your best performance comes when you are dialed in, when you're in the zone, when mentally you're calm, but also have your edge. And that takes a lot, not just your own willpower, but it takes an environment. It takes a culture, right, that really emphasizes those kind of things. And so that I would agree. It's been really exciting to see like some truly great games, some truly remarkable performances, like just really, really outstanding. And I think that's a combination, as we've talked about, of a lot of things that are going into this ingredient. So it really is an exciting time in sport, if you ask me.
Yep, absolutely, Dr. Mrazik. Incredible individual performances, incredible unit performances, offense, defense, special teams in all the sports, and incredible team performances. Just such a great thing because it's all encompassing. Well, listen, what a great conversation. Again, I feel like I've let the crushers down out there because we really haven't cracked that nut on perception yet. Perception is such a monster, but I think this kind of flows into that perception conversation because the perception of the mental game, I think, being more accepted, being more part of the process, and the understanding that it takes years to experience all these different things so an athlete can finally fine-tune it for them, as you said, as an individual, to really tap into their potential, right? What a beautiful thing. That's human performance, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. And that just touches on so many important things. Another topic is just the power of adversity. And, for athletes, just really understanding, putting yourself in a position that that there's going to be a challenge ahead of you, and yet how you can really thrive in those environments. So that perception thing of like, how can I succeed and how can I be the best I can be? It's not a straight line, right? Yeah. It's not a direct path. It's like, oh, we're going to get there easily, right? But that perception of, okay, what do I have to do and how do I see myself in relationship to my peers and to the sport, like, is really interesting. That whole identity piece fits a lot into that. So topic for another time, but so fascinating.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know you got to go. So I'm going to put this question out there now for the next time you're on, because I'm going to write it down. The fact that athletes have awareness of this now feeds into how they perceive the control they have over what's going on. And I think that's a conversation we have to have next time we talk, Dr. Mrazik, because I think we're at that point. I think athletes are realizing they have more control than they realize, right? And that's exciting.
Yeah, it sure is. That's like you said, it's a whole huge ever topic, but how do you control certain things and avoid trying to control everything, right?
Right.
Especially when you're a young player, you just want to control everything. So love it. Absolutely love it.
Okay, it's on the question list right now, mister. So we're going to beware. It's coming next time. Dr. Mrazik, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you and everything you do. Hey, people, by the way, the last thing, the other thing that's great right now is it's accessible. This online world has really allowed us to reach out and connect with so many athletes, families, and teams. EAS.ca, right, is your incredible online program. I'm going to encourage every team, organization, and athlete to check it out because that's what it's all about, correct?
It's easapp.ca, but that's the website. And thank you for that. But no, we really have worked hard to accumulate a really workable, easy, interactive portal for athletes that really addresses the low-hanging fruit in sports. So again, that's my dream, that's my passion, is to really work with athletes and to see them succeed in every aspect of life, but especially in the mental game.
Yeah. Powerful, powerful stuff. Dr. Mrazik, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, you guys kind of get the picture, right? We're on the tip of the iceberg, and that conversation we just had with Dr. Mrazik, phenomenal. Listen, if you're involved in sport, if you're a parent, coach, or athlete, I really do suggest you go check out the Elite Athlete Services. They're easapp.ca in Canada. I think there's a .com one as well. But just search out Elite Athlete Services and Dr. Mrazik, and it'll take you there. That's one of the things that I believe is changing the game right now. Okay, we know that athletes know about hydration. We know that nutrition is great. And again, I think if there were two of the hardest things that athletes have to really do in order to achieve is, one, just getting into a routine and sleeping, really protecting their sleep, and eating properly. Eating properly might be the biggest job an athlete has, right? And it is because it's a massive undertaking. It's expensive right now, and you kind of got to know what you're doing. Going out and shopping and then having it ready. And then you have to cook, and cooking. Oh, if you can get into the art of cooking, you can have so much fun with it, but it's a big job, especially if you're a competing athlete and you're traveling all the time. That's why we have private chefs for a lot of our pro guys. Really wholesome, well-made food in little containers, ready to go for the guys when they're on a homestand, when they're away. We're really controlling clubhouse and locker room foods right now, right? And then we're snacking and just really controlling biochemistry. And Dr. Anduise Allen is a huge part of our knowledge base there for sure. She's coming up in an upcoming episode as well. But those two things, sleep and nutrition. But the mental side of the game, and that was a great conversation with Dr. Mrazik. So much I want to get to there. Like, it has now become sort of, I don't want to say mainstream, but it has certainly gained momentum. And we're seeing athletes now being exposed to it earlier and earlier in their development. What is that going to look like? I believe we have a tsunami of performance coming our way for those people who are onto this, okay? Because again, the physical side, all right, from the strength and development side is great. But then the physical side in terms of sport performance, like our baseball course, our Creating Coachable Players course is for coaches in baseball. But I mean, if you have a ground-based athlete, I mean, any coach can learn from this, because it's one thing to take the strength and conditioning, all right, and help an athlete get, bigger, faster, stronger, whatever they need to do at their phase of development. But it's a whole other deal making it work inside of the sport, matching the sport demands. NFL, very different than our Major League Baseball players, very, very different from our NHL hockey players and our snow-based athletes, which are very different from our court athletes. Squash, tennis, volleyball, basketball, very, very different. They all have to get strong. They all have to be have cardiovascular fitness. They have to have anaerobic fitness. They have to have mobility. They have to be lined up. They have to be functioning well, but then they have to be able to perform in their sport. That's something we specialize in, that I specialize in, and I love it. I love taking an athlete and then creating performance in their sport. Base stealing is very different than running as a wide receiver in the NFL. Being an offensive lineman is very, very different than being a guard in the NBA or a fullback in soccer, all right? So all of these things have to be nuanced eventually into the sport the athlete's playing. again, one of the conversations we could have, and we'll have again, is the multi-sport athlete thing coming up. So important. It was a huge topic down in Denver last weekend at the coaches conference, right? Multi-sport athletes. Let's bring it all together. And then when an athlete finally does specialize or hone in on one sport, and then probably one or two positions in a sport, they really have a massive foundation to create core competencies to execute, right? It's so important, and that takes time. This conversation about the mental game was fascinating with Dr. Mrazik because it takes time. Having athletes exposed to this stuff and then figuring it out, and then figuring out how it's going to work for them inside of their sport, inside of their position in their sport, and where they're at in terms of their development. We're not there yet. We haven't had an athlete, I believe, really go through the full gamut of what we know about brain training and mental performance, and then get to a point where they're matured physically. They're also matured on a technical, tactical side, and it all comes together to be really, really meaningful. Right now, I think we're playing catch up on the mental game. We'll ask Dr. Mrazik about this next time as well, because I think this is a thought I should have asked him. But I think we're catching up. We're putting in the mental game after the fact. Okay, the athlete and the player side is way up here, and now we're patching in parts of the mental game we think are appropriate. What happens when these young athletes we're working with in grade 6 and grade 7 now have exposure to this, and they're now fostering it and building it as they grow, mature, and develop in their sports? Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me? I don't know what's coming, but I'm going to predict a tsunami of performance, and I believe we're seeing it right now in the professional sports. I mean, look at the college sports right now. I mean, the football that's done. We're going to have the Final Four coming up, or the March Madness for the NCAA basketball. We see it now in soccer. The Olympics are coming up as well. I can't wait for the Olympics. I love it, and we're going to be watching this very, very closely because I believe we're at a very cool point. And for the athletes that are coming up, the next generation, I've never been more excited for any athletes ever. Because again, we have the physical side down, right? We really have a great understanding there. Get a good strength coach, our performance person. You need it. You need to be listening to the show and all the people we have on. You would be a great expert, at least you'll have a great knowledge base and all the things you need to think about if you're really going to pursue sport with a passion, right? And again, it goes back to the thing. Do we know? I say this to every athlete we work with at every age of development, including our pro guys. We have pro guys. We're still trying to get better. Do we know how good they can actually be? No, not until we decide what needs to be done and we attack. For our younger athletes, they're so far away. We have no idea. We have no idea. And one of the conversations this last weekend was Tom Brady. Go back right now. Everybody, when you're done listening to the show here right away, I will wrap it up right away. I want you to go back onto YouTube or wherever it is and watch Tom Brady at his very first combine. And then just understand that I think he's like in his early 20s there. Let's double check. We'll double check that. But was he ready then to be who he became? No, he was in the ebb and flow of the process of becoming the Tom Brady we know. And now, look, like when he started, on TV, was he great? Well, a lot of criticism about Tom Brady. I kind of liked him. I mean, I think he's great, but he is really good now in terms of the television presence. And you get better. You get better at stuff when you work at it. And of course, he's got that mindset. He's a pretty cool cat to watch, right? Because he's got that mindset. He understands development. He understands getting better. He understands dealing with adversity. And that's kind of the stuff that Dr. Mrazik talked about, all right? So like the ebb and flow of time, right? And just understanding that the window for some of these athletes is very short. So, working on this stuff through those key developmental times is critically important. Again, it's one of the reasons we put together our course, Creating Coachable Players. Now that's geared in for baseball, but we're having a platform coming for every coach. It's so well received, but it's about teaching coaches at every level, especially the ones who are coming into coaching, understanding the growth and development side. The coaches are so good at the technical, tactical side of the game now. We have so much sharing. There's so many resources out there. But now what happens when we get coaches who understand this world? Because they don't have the budgets for strength and conditioning coaches or mental performance coaches. They don't have maybe the awareness of everything that's involved there like we would have, right? They've got an expertise in helping players perform better in their sport. The technical, tactical side, the individual skill set, and then the team tactics that are involved with every single sport. That's what coaches are doing. What happens when coaches and parents really understand this big world of our 5 priorities: sleep, rest, recovery, nutrition, hydration, posture, range of motion, movement, and the brain game? What happens then? Again, I believe we're on the cusp of a tsunami of performance. I couldn't be more excited. Okay, if we look at, I think about these guys who are playing right now, and why is it we're seeing some of the best competition we've ever seen? I can't wait for the Olympics again. I mean, just think about it. The average age for a player entering the NFL is right around 22, right in there. 19 typically, 20, 21, 19 is the youngest. The NBA, 19 or 20, a little earlier, a little more college directive. There's not really a feeder system there. Major League Baseball, 25.2 years is about the average right now. It was 24. It's inching up. Why do you think that is? I'll get to it, but why do you think that is? Why every other sport averages right around 20 years? 19, 20 years. Major League Soccer is another one around 23, okay? But baseball, 25.2 years in Baseball America's count in one of the most recent studies, because it's so skilled. It is such a skilled sport. I'll get the numbers of these other sports like tennis, golf, okay? I'll get the average entry level into the pros there. But for these major sports, North American sports, that's the average. And baseball is special. It takes longer to develop baseball players because it's so skilled. There's such a heavy technical, tactical side. At some point, it's you and the ball, and you can't escape that. On all the other ones, you can rely on teammates. I'm not saying you cut corners, but you can learn how to maybe cheat in certain instances. You can get around things, but you have to be good in baseball. There's just no way around it. And then if you look at the average career, our job is one, to help athletes get there. Athletes that love and want to see how far they can go is to get there. And we put all this together, right? The athlete and the player side. And then we take all that and make it work in their sport so they can hopefully maybe tap into the pro ranks. Here's the deal. We're going to have a massive influx of really, really talented players. But the number of players who are, or the number of spots at the highest level of sport, that's not going to change. So what's going to happen to the upper end of sport? Well, it's something that I've been talking about probably for the last 10 years. I don't believe we're seeing the best players in professional sports right now. I know we're not. There's some special players there, don't get me wrong. But all in all, generally, we're not even close to seeing like the real heights of human performance. And that's why I'm so enamored with the postseason in the NHL, Major League Baseball, and the NFL right now. We are seeing better sport, I think, all around. And this is why, okay? Athletes are starting to come through at a time where it's very holistic. And when they get there, they're really well prepared, but also they understand all of the things that have to go into achieving at the highest levels. It's part of the system now. It's not patchwork. It's not one athlete here, another one here, maybe a couple over there. It's going to be everybody. And the fact that the number of spots at the elite levels of sport isn't going to change. MLB is going to expand 2 teams. So what? There's going to be maybe 50, 60 more roster spots available. Does baseball, this is a question we're going to answer closer to spring training or address closer to spring training, is there enough talent on earth to field 2 more really good baseball teams? Well, just look at the Colorado Rockies and a couple of the other teams that had 100+ losses in the last couple of years. Are those teams really able to compete? And again, if it's a money game, we'll let the money thing work it out. But I'm talking pure talent. Is there enough talent for 2 more teams? So the NFL might expand, the NBA might expand, NHL might expand. Okay, a few more. But the number of spots, for the most part, isn't going to change. But the amount of talent coming up, I believe, is really going to raise the bar of what it looks like to be a professional athlete. And that is exciting, right? It really, really is. Listen, I got to thank Dr. Mrazik for that great discussion today. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Again, listen, if you have questions, comments, smart remarks, or if you need some help, reach out. JeffKrushell.com, info@JeffKrushell.com is the email. You can direct message me on social media for sure. We will get back to you. We answer every single message that we get, ladies and gentlemen. And so please do reach out. And again, in our 20th season, if there's a guest in the past 20 years that resonated with you, or if there's somebody you'd like to see on the show, let us know. it's what it's about. Just massive sharing on human performance, okay? And like Dr. Mrazik today, our guests love to share their knowledge. They spent their lives mastering their crafts, just like our athletes. Let's really tap into their expertise, and that's really what Krush Performance is all about. You guys are a huge part of that. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in today as well. Get out there, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Krush Performance.
Find out what it takes to be a top performer. Get the Krush blog, podcast, and newsletter at crushperformance.com.
Goodbye now. Don't forget to write.